It is now time for our panel discussion. Please welcome to the stage Alison Couch, owner of Ignite Accounting and Business Advisors, a small business in Atlanta, Georgia; Dana Peterson, the chief economist and leader of the Economy Strategy and Finance Center at the Conference Board; Candice Price, co-owner of Home Team Auto Sales in Omaha, Nebraska; and Joby Young, executive vice president at the American Farm Bureau Federation. Welcome.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I know the voice of God, otherwise known as my colleague Lisa, introduced you, but can I go down the line and kind of talk a little bit about your passion on this issue, your affiliation, and what you want people to remember, take away from today?
Absolutely. So my name is Alison Couch, and I own a small business, a small accounting firm in Columbia County, a small town called Harlem. And I help other small business owners. So I'm very aware of the challenges that small business owners face on a personal level, as well as talking with multiple small business owners every day. So this issue has been very, very near and dear to my heart because I've seen how it's affected small businesses, and it's such a widespread benefit. So the deduction itself has been most beneficial when you compare it to things like depreciation or other tax credits that affect a specific industry, or where depreciation, you have to buy a piece of equipment. This is something that is more widespread horizontally and vertically when you look at the benefit to small business owners.
Hi, my name is Dana Peterson. I'm the Global Chief Economist at the Conference Board. Usually we look at large businesses, but the things that could be coming down the pipeline in terms of impacts on businesses more generally are really important for small businesses. And I'm hoping that I can just shed some light on some of the things that businesses like yourselves should also think about for next year. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Candice Price. I'm a member of NFIB. I'm the co-owner of Home Team Auto Sales, along with my business partner, Ron Devers. One of the perspectives that I'm bringing to today is just that of the small business owner. Someone who bootstrapped to get their business started, someone who knows what it is to not have very much in ways of finances to get things going and keep a business running. But not only keep it running, but also be able to scale and get to the point where you can employ, to get to the point where you are impacting your community. Those are the things that I do. I also serve on the board for our Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce. And so what that means is that I have the opportunity to work with not only small businesses, but large businesses. And so the perspective that I want to make sure everyone knows is that we work together. So this isn't about having a negative effect on large business. We believe in corporations. We believe in what they do to impact our economy. We also just need everyone to believe in what we do as small business owners to impact our economy as well. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here and to hopefully help shed a little bit more light on why you should support making this permanent. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Joby Young. I'm Executive Vice President of the American Farm Bureau Federation, and we are the voice of agriculture. We're the largest general purpose farm and agriculture organization in the country. Our federation here at the American Farm Bureau, we have 51 state organizations, all 50 states and Puerto Rico, and they are in turn the federation of 2,800 county farm bureaus across the country. So farm families across the country get together, they join their local farm bureau, and they similar to NFIB, they make our policy. Over the last few months, those county farm bureaus across the country have been meeting and having policy development, and our states are meeting now. And in January, we'll have a convention, and we'll get a policy book that gives me and our whole team our marching orders of the things that we need to advocate for. And it might not surprise everybody in the room here that with all those family farms being organized as small businesses across the country, that tax issues and tax treatment, and certainly this issue, is an important one. So that's why I'm here today, to bring that perspective, and I look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, and as we've been discussing all morning, small businesses, a bipartisan issue. Kamala Harris talked a lot about small businesses on the campaign trail, as well as Donald Trump. Candice, to you, but also interested in other panelists weighing in, On the ground level, how has this deduction affected small businesses? Adam mentioned something, Kathleen, that was hadn't crossed my mind, just surviving the pandemic. I mean, this country's gone through a lot. And then we had inflation, and we had massive fears of a recession that didn't happen, but a lot of turmoil in the economic world. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. One of the main things that was mentioned by Kathleen is just our inability to be able to plan. It's very tough to be able to grow and maintain if you don't know what's coming. And a lot of small business owners are not aware that this deduction is going to go away. And then what do they do as they're planning? One thing that we speak about here a lot is the direct impact of having this deduction, right? What we're able to do. We can employ, we can buy equipment, we can grow, we can do the training that we need to do. But what we don't always talk about is the indirect impact. So my business, for instance, we sell cars. And so we do a lot of business-to-business transactions. So now if your business no longer has this deduction, but you were planning to buy a new truck for your plumbing company, or you were planning to buy another vehicle for one of your administrative assistants, now you can't do that. That impacted my business. So not only now am I not receiving the deduction, I now have to increase my prices, and I now will have less sales as well. So it's the indirect impact. And then what that does in turn, because my business supports our local economy, it supports our local community greatly of North Omaha, I now can't go in turn and take that money to another small business owner or help another individual or family that was depending on my purchase as well. So it's the direct and indirect impact that we're feeling from this. I think that one thing that's been amazing that we have been able to do, because we have had this deduction for these few years, is be able to look at things where, what other employee do I need? And what that allows for a small business owner, it allows them to go home earlier. Why is that important? It affects the family structure. It affects their health when they can get some rest, because now they have an employee. So when the doors close at 5, they can actually go home. I've spent a lot of nights at my business where I'm still there at 11 o'clock in the evening. My business partner and I are still there at midnight. But once we get an employee in place, which we went from having 2 to now having 6 of us, which is a very big deal. So when we say small business, that's what we are. So now we're impacting someone else's home and their finances, which allows us to go home and rest.
Alison, same question to you.
So one of the congressmen mentioned earlier that borrowing power is a challenge for small business owners, and I think that this deduction provides the opportunity to free up cash flow. So that cash flow enables you to make capital investments and hire employees, and that's very important for small business owners, and having the ability to have the funds to do those types of investments.
Mm-hmm. Dana, just from a big macro perspective, this Congress has a lot of challenges ahead. We talked about the debt with the congressman. How is Congress going to juggle all this? Because when you're moving massive, sweeping $1 trillion, and by some estimates $4 trillion would be extending the tax cuts without adding any sweeteners. Just talk a little bit about that, because every Congress has its challenges, but this one is, I think, more so than normal.
Sure. The big elephant in the room, as you mentioned, is the fact that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 is expiring. Not the corporate taxes, but certainly the small business 20% pass-through tax cut, and also individual taxes, which impact many small business owners as well. So my understanding that most likely the next Congress will look to extend many of those tax breaks, because otherwise we'd have a huge shock. Consumers would see their take-home income reduce significantly. They wouldn't spend as much. Also, that impacts businesses for whom they patronize. And also for small businesses, as we've heard already, it would be a major blow. So I would imagine that this next Congress will look to extend many of these very helpful tax breaks. But it could come at a cost. Certainly that cost could be in terms of reducing spending. And those spending cuts would potentially affect many of your customers and also businesses. And most likely the first place they would look is non-defense discretionary spending. And so that includes a lot of some of our very favorite programs. So I think that's something that small businesses really have to think about in terms of, yes, you might see an extension of these tax provisions, but it might come at the cost of less spending on areas that are critical for small businesses.
What do you think about, just as a quick follow-up, Elon Musk is heading up this panel with Vivek Ramaswamy. Musk wants to cut $2 trillion. That's a lot of money, even in Washington. What is the effect of that? I mean, it seems like as Congress will be moving forward on extending and coming up with a new tax bill that will not only extend but add stuff, also cutting. That's tricky.
Well, it's interesting. The Congressional Budget Office every year produces a lengthy document on ways to reduce spending, as well as ways to raise revenue. So this isn't a new idea. And indeed, this, the two persons who will be participating in this, they're not a government agency.
Right.
So they're more in an advisory role. But the thing is that they will come up with ideas. And again, some of those ideas, the easiest place to go would be non-defense discretionary spending, but it may also include mandatory spending. And mandatory spending includes provisions for Social Security, healthcare, both for Medicare and Medicaid, which helps to provide healthcare for lower income persons in the U.S. It also could affect big areas such as health, education. These are all things that matter for many people in the United States and also for small business owners. So it's really, they can come up with these recommendations, but it's really how much will Congress push through. And indeed, there are going to be multiple points, I think, next year where Congress will be faced with, okay, do we further increase debt and deficits to extend taxes and things like that, or do we cut? And indeed, the debt ceiling issue is coming up again in January.
Yep.
And, all Republicans are not the same. Some will say in order to raise a debt ceiling or suspend it, which means we'll look at it in a few years, they may ask for these cuts. And again, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, those provisions expire starting in October of next year. So it's not really clear. So I think it's important for the NFIB and small businesses to speak to their congresspersons and explain how these various cuts or changes will impact your businesses and thereby the U.S. economy. Small businesses make up most businesses in the U.S. They're employing most people, and you really don't want to shut down that engine.
Mm-hmm. Joby, talk about just kind of the feedback you get from the farming community and your members. Are they aware that this could go away? Obviously, farmers were front and center, as far as the election, and Trump talked a lot about farming, and obviously he has big tariff plans as well. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the farming community and the farm families across the country are certainly very aware of this issue. That's why it's a priority of ours, frankly. And 98%, I think, of farms in this country are family farms. 98% are pass-through entities. And they have unique pressures. Some of the other panelists mentioned the pressures of business. I think farming and ranching is unique in a number of ways. It's a uniquely risky business. There's a lot of other businesses that might not be as subject to the variations in the weather and global markets and the availability of labor at exactly the right time when you need it, and so on and so forth. So a lot of risk inherent in that. Another aspect of farming and ranching is that the farmers and ranchers are price takers on both ends in terms of the price of their inputs. They don't have much control over, and then also their product. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk about raising prices in response to tax policy and other things, those levers aren't usually as available. So every dollar and cent matters, and about 50% of farmers and ranchers make use of this particular deduction every year. And a lot of those that aren't making use of it, it's because they didn't have a profit that particular year, which that's part of farming and ranching too. It's a very up and down business, and you have to plan over the long term. Not just the next year or the next 5 years, but for most families out there that are farming, it's a generational thing. And so having control of a variable like this makes a lot of difference when you're one of these small family farms out there, for sure.
Alison, you work directly with other small business owners. What are you hearing, trepidation, concerns about what policymakers should or shouldn't do?
So we're doing tax planning right now for year end for 2024. This time next year, it's going to be a much different conversation that we'll be having. And one of the panelists previous to us spoke about certainty and just having some way to know what is coming up for them.
Sure.
And also awareness. So I think that events like this are great to get the awareness out there so that small business owners do understand that this is going to be a heavy hit on their tax burden and liability for future years if it's not extended. So those are two important things that need to be looked at and continued as we go into next year.
To that point, and anyone could weigh in as far as Congressman Smucker, said he's an optimist, obviously, that he thinks maybe this could get done by April or May. But how important is it for it to get done before Christmas, based upon planning and that kind of thing?
It's very important for small business owners to do tax planning about this time in the year, even a little bit sooner, actually, in the fall, so that if there are equipment purchases that need to be made or investments that need to be made, they can do that before the end of the year. So if it's at the last hour and we go into even January and it becomes retroactive, that becomes a challenge, because then you've missed the opportunity to make those purchases that would have benefited you before year end.
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Well, I mean, I would concur that in legislation such as this, sooner is always better for that certainty piece. And we talk a lot about that with, things like Farm Bill or the availability of labor or, any of the other issues we're talking about, that the ability to plan ahead of time is always going to be critically important. At least from the agriculture community, there's so many moving pieces. I know there are in small businesses of every type. But when you're from a agriculture perspective, when you're talking about managing a crop year and a tax year and a fiscal year for different things that you're having to take into account, and you had to be in the field while you also had to be around the kitchen table and in the office making these plans, and so having the ability to sequence all that the right way with as much forward planning as possible is critically important.
Candice, as far as tax policy, health policies become a lot more partisan over the years. Not one Republican supported Obamacare, not one Democrat voted for the Trump tax cuts, which is what we're talking about here. Why isn't that more bipartisan? Because as we talked with the two lawmakers, there are bipartisan ideas out there. And even though Congressman Smucker says, which is right, they're going to go down the reconciliation path because they did win everything. Margin in the House, very small. Right. Senate margin, 53 seats. It's not 55, not 56, certainly nowhere near 60. Right. Just talk about that, because that could be, in the end all, you never know. Democrats may have to help, and then there's going to have to be a deal if they can't pass things with a narrow majority.
So this is my personal opinion.
Sure.
Democrats should help. They should absolutely help. This affects their constituents. Okay. This affects their country. This affects their community. This affects their Main Street. Everyone should help. I think that it is unfortunate that this isn't a bipartisan issue. I look at it as a bipartisan issue because who does not have either a small business owner in your family, a small business owner in your friend group, or someone who works for a small business? So that means no matter what, this bill is impacting someone that you know and care for. And that alone should be enough to say, it doesn't matter if it's someone on the other side of the aisle that's supporting this. That's great. They should support it because they have friends and family who this affects as well. And so do I. And so do we. And that should be reason enough to be able to say, I'm just going to simply stand for what's right and for what's good. And this happens to be one of those issues where supporting it is simply what's right and what's good, because it has such a large impact on our economy. We talk through these numbers and the number of small businesses that are out there. What we also are not looking at is the number of small businesses to come. I spend a lot of my time working with those who say, well, I'm thinking about starting a business, or how do I do that? Or I'm thinking about closing my doors. What are my next steps? And I have to talk with them through the possibility or the potential to be able to stay open and what's needed. And at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about here. Are we going to cause individuals to have to close businesses that have been in their families for many years? And you may not look at it that large, but maybe it's simply the mom and pop ice cream shop that you take your child or grandchild to. Maybe it's the lawn service that's in your area and they've been servicing, your family and your community for 10 and 15 years. So now they're having to consider over some of these tax implications whether or not they get to stay in business. And now we're impacting unemployment as well, because one thing that small business owners do well is we employ ourselves. And so that's something we need to be able to continue to do.
We will open it up in a little bit for audience questions. This is really for anybody other than Congressman Smucker's bill. What else should Congress do? Danny, you have any thoughts on tax policy, or we talked about government efficiency, but what do you want this next Congress to focus on that maybe it's not getting the headlines?
Absolutely. I think, I'm sorry, was that from this? Oh, okay.
We'll go down the line.
Okay,
you can start.
sounds great. Do you want to start, Joe?
Yeah, sure. Well, of course, in the tax policy realm, it's another one of our priorities is the estate tax. When in agriculture, where you have such a group of people that has their assets tied up in land that they're using for production. And many times these are generational businesses. That's extremely important. Some of the business expensing provisions are extremely important. I know probably across business, but certainly in agriculture. Outside of tax policy, one of our biggest priorities, probably the biggest priority right now, is a farm bill. We're delayed, as many people in the group here know. We're delayed over a year and have an expired farm bill now, and so we're looking forward to what might be possible in the lame duck, and if not that, then in the new Congress.
Just quickly, what do you think the chances of passing it in lame duck are?
Well, it's tough sledding.
Yeah.
And it's probably uphill a little bit too. But I'm paid to be an optimist. I'm paid to find the possible, not the probable.
Right.
And so we continue to work on those sorts of things. And so we'll see what happens. It's certainly going to be a challenge if it does go into next year to be talking about a tax extension, and then also talk about a farm bill as well. But that's what we're here for, and we'll continue to do that if that comes to pass. So. Farm labor's ever-present issue. For us, it has been for a couple decades in agriculture. It becomes more and more acute every day. And so that's an extremely big issue. I'll stop there. We got plenty more, but I'll let the others chime in.
Candice?
That's so funny. I think there definitely are plenty.
Yeah.
We appreciate you mentioning those, especially I'm from Nebraska.
Oh, great.
And so, we're heavily ag. And so everything that he's talking through directly impacts exactly where I'm from in the country. Some of the other issues that I think are important as we speak to tax policy and some other issues would definitely be finding funding for some of the programs that support small business, such as the SBA, needing additional funding, but also simply when we talk about regulation. One of the issues that's important with NFIB is the Big Brother Overreach Act. And so the thing that should be remembered is when you're talking with small business owners, we just don't have a lot of time or a lot of hands, which means if you're adding to regulations for us to get through anything that we're looking to accomplish, it makes it so much tougher. And that means we're also now not doing what we're here to do, and that's simply run the business, right? That's simply to grow the business because we're stuck in other regulation that needs to be done. But also when we talk through tax credits that are possible, whether it's for hiring or for training our employees, I think those are some of the issues that are very important that we have an opportunity to look at over this next cycle.
Dana?
Sure. Just picking up on regulation, most likely there will be lots of deregulation. So that should help small businesses as well as large businesses. But there are two areas that I think Congress should take a more active role in, or at least advisory role to the extent that they can. It's certainly around tariffs and also around labor. With respect to tariffs, it is very likely that we may see outsized tariffs on imports. And that will affect anyone who imports goods, either finished products or inputs. Certainly, if we see tariffs of 60% on Chinese imports, that reduces GDP by about 1.2 percentage points. That's a lot of lost growth. It also raises the unemployment rate and hikes up inflation. We just experienced a very inflationary period. I'm sure most people don't want to go back to that period. So to the extent that Congress can act as an advisory to the next administration to help moderate some of these ideas, I think would be great. And the other thing is labor. Certainly when we go back to the first administration, there was a big focus on labor, both undocumented persons as well as high-end H-1B visas. So if we see a return to that, we could see a challenge for many businesses that depend upon foreign workers, especially finance, science, but also economies, industries that are dependent upon lower skilled workers. So if you see this like kind of dragnet that's pulling everybody in and everyone's afraid, you could see workers just kind of disappear. And so I think it'd be really helpful for Congress to also play a role in helping to temper some of those aspirations.
What's on your wish list?
So, tax credits and deductions are so beneficial for small business, but I'm going to echo what some of my fellow panelists have said, and even more so than the credits and the deductions is the ability to let the business owner do their work and run their business. And that can be accomplished by cutting the red tape and the bureaucracy, specifically this BOI reporting. If we can see that come off and allow business owners to use that time to run their business. If we can use some of the funding that has gone to the IRS to fund new agents and things of that nature, to actually answer the phones and answer questions and prevent the long wait times that my clients face when they do have a question.
I've heard about those long wait times.
That's
I think we've all been
on
those wait lines.
So
Yes.
3 hours
Yep.
to ask one payroll question is
Right.
tough. So that would be a good use of those dollars versus some of the ideas that have already been proposed on using those dollars, as well as just for example, had the opportunity to testify before a field trial last year with the Ways and Means Committee and proposed the idea of raising the dollar amount required for 1099. So it was $600.
Right.
Congressman Jason Smith raised that up to $1,000. Looking at little ways like that to keep
That's a
that
big
red
deal.
tape and bureaucracy
Yeah.
down. Absolutely.
Why don't we open up to audience questions? We have a mic going around. If you can identify yourself. Okay, we'll go
We
to
have one from
Lisa.
our online audience
Okay.
first. This is from Will Thawasson from UTHSC College of Dentistry. Why wasn't this tax cut made permanently to begin with?
Anyone want to tackle?
Wow. What was the question?
Why are we talking about extending? Why wasn't it permanent? And some of that deals with the inside baseball game of reconciliation. But if it is bipartisan, then obviously there's more certainty.
I think a lot of it had to do with the expense. If you think about it, the amount that's expiring is equivalent to anywhere from $3 to $5.2 trillion, right? And that's excluding the permanent tax cuts that were made for larger corporations. And so when it comes to pushing a bill through Congress, you have to have compromises. And I think that that was one compromise, but with the understanding that, once we get there, to 2026, the fiscal year 2026, that Congress would extend these things. But, that's always the thought that, don't worry about it. When we get to it, we'll deal with it. But now we're here.
Yeah.
And so that's the big question. Are we willing to allow deficits and debt to expand further by allowing all of these provisions to be extended? That's the long-term pain. But in the short run, if you don't extend them, there's a major shock to the economy.
Sure.
And you're cutting several percentage points off of growth and massively affecting individuals, businesses large and small. So that's the reason why it wasn't done, to get it done in the first place. But now we're here. We need to address this.
Question right there.
Is this working? No.
Yeah.
This one is.
There we go. I feel like Vanna White. Jonathan Katz, Department of Labor, Office of Disability Employment Policy. In our outreach with particularly entrepreneurs with disabilities and with small businesses that are hiring workers with disabilities, we've heard a lot about the difficulty of accessing tax credits, in this case, the Disabled Access Tax Credit and the WOTC. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of just what more broadly you're seeing, not just in terms of, as Candice, you said, the time or hands to handle the regulations, but also the time and hands to even handle the accessing some of these tax credits, whether with businesses like yours, Alison, or those who are doing it independently.
Well, just a general thought, and thank you for your service at DOL, and thank you for being here and engaging on these issues. But whether it's a tax credit, or whether it's a DOL program, I talked about labor, and so certainly it's an important agency for us. The the policy certainly is important, but then also the ability for a small business person or anybody else in America that has to interact with the government anyway to actually navigate these programs. And so I worked at USDA once upon a time, and a big focus of ours when we were there was this efficiency, effectiveness, customer service aspect, because it's a challenge. And so bringing that efficiency to it so that somebody can actually realize the benefits and access the programs is extremely important. I appreciate you bringing up the point. At least if you're a farmer out in Nebraska or Georgia or somewhere, you do have to be you're a farmer, you're a meteorologist, you're a hydrologist, you're an agronomist, you're an HR professional, and oh, by the way, you're an accountant too, and a regulatory expert. So you have to be able to do all these things, and making sure that they're formulated so that they can actually be accessed, whether it's a tax credit or a labor program, for instance, is extremely important.
Absolutely. And of course, I see the value of having a good public accountant because that's my profession, but it's also important to just plug yourself into continuing education programs and really stay abreast of the latest and greatest programs that are out there, and whether that be classes or going online and following up on ideas and programs that you hear are available.
Joby, just talk about a little bit about the challenges in rural America. I thought your 98% stat was very interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah.
A lot of people here on the East Coast think broadband's everywhere and it's accessible. But what do you hear about that? Are politicians paying more attention to that?
Sure. Well, there's any number of challenges. Of course, broadband's one of those. Whether you're a small business in town or whether if you're out on the county line, you're farming and ranching, especially as more technologies come online, when you're using a drone and data-heavy applications and trying to make use of those sorts of things. That's certainly important. There's any number of other challenges. A couple of stats that are certainly concerning in the farm and ranching community out in rural America are, two things I would mention to the group. The USDA does a census of agriculture every 5 years. The last one was in 22. Between 2017 and 22, we lost 140,000 farms in this country, and so a lot of, and that's as you might guess, that's a lot of your smaller, medium-sized farms that have more trouble making. Realizing economies of scale and making things pencil. So that's part of why we're all here today, because that's certainly part of it. And another piece is that there's probably about 4 times as many farmers and ranchers that are at or above retirement age than there are folks that are under 25. So I think it's about 1.3 million farmers and ranchers that are at or above retirement age, 300,000 at 25. So that's certainly a challenge too. We want folks to be moving to rural America. We want them to be entering farming and ranching, starting farms. And then one spouse may go work in town, run a business in town, and that brings that vitality and vibrancy to rural America. So that's why these issues are so important, because I mentioned, if you're looking at what your career is going to be, and you're looking at being an entrepreneur or being a farmer, and you're thinking about having to wear all those hats I just mentioned a moment ago and take on all that risk and have the ability to go to a bank and sign a note that might be pretty intimidating, versus going to a different way that might be a little more less intimidating. You're weighing that. So we want to bring people into being entrepreneurs. We want to bring them into the farm and ranching community. We benefit for decades from having the most affordable, available, nutritious food supply in the entire world. We spend less of our take-home dollars as Americans on food, and that comes from having this sort of integrated, diversified, stable farm economy out there across rural America, and we want to preserve that.
That's interesting, because every event we almost touch upon in every one about the aging workforce and how it's affecting and challenging every industry. Well, we've run out of time. Please thank our great panelists for joining us this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks to all of our wonderful speakers this morning. On behalf of The Hill and our sponsor, NFIB, we'd like to thank everyone who joined us here in person and those of you who tuned in online. If you missed any portion of today's discussion, the full event video is available on thehill.com. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.